So we kind of put all of what we found using AOE data about education, using some information from Advanced Vermont about training and credentialing, and then a lot of information, heavy hand information from Marianne Sheehan, Vermont Talent Pipeline Management, which she can speak to any questions about that specific data. So we put that together, and really the point of today is going through kind of this like brain dump of information and figuring out what should our top priorities be looking at this information. And I think Abby and I talked a little bit about what the data was showing us before, and I think it starts to become more clear as we go through it. So is there any housekeeping items or anything folks wanted to bring up before we get into it?
Nope.
Alrighty, great. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll see if I can do this effectively. Can everyone see that okay? Great, okay. So today's agenda, we're going to go through the data, decide our top 3 priority areas based on the data, brainstorm ways and activities to improve those things, and then Abby and I will develop the actual roadmap for and goals for those. But in addition to kind of brainstorming, we want to talk about success measures, priority areas, and then potential goals for the committee to actually achieve in the short and long term.
Tori, we don't see your screen anymore.
Oh.
It was there for a minute, but it disappeared.
Huh. Can you see now?
Yep.
Okay. So disclaimer, as I said, these sources are not, we did not do this data collection. This is heavily from UVM, from Vermont Talent Pipeline Management, and then AOE. So it's good data. We know it's good sources that, you know, had kind of the rigorous data process, but it's not, I just want to clarify that we did not like go through some major research project for this. We just are really compiling it and kind of putting it together in a way that makes sense. So first and foremost, again, this is from Vermont Talent Pipeline, establishing employer need. When we're talking about manufacturing, and again, I almost, you know, would defer to Marianne on any of the specifics on this, but, you know, the kind of big areas that came forward in their research was the need for production operators and assemblers, equipment maintenance and technicians, CNC machinists, team leaders, engineers, welders, and solderers. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but okay.
Solderers.
Solderers, okay.
Yep, they solder things.
Abby and I were talking about the day. We're like, we do not know what that job entails, but it sounds interesting. So, and then again, just kind of going through some of more Vermont Talent Pipeline data, their critical job forecast. I think these paint a pretty interesting picture about, you know, kind of like if there's going to be a new position, if there's going to be a replacing position, et cetera, like what the kind of future of these different areas will look like moving forward. And then again, so some of the employer competence common elements, these are the things that employers were very clear about in terms of, you know, overall, that there's a lack of career awareness and exploration, which I think we'll be touching on the most later when we talk about the education pieces. Obviously, employability skills. I mean, some of the different factors that impact, you know, the workforce, like housing, high cost of living, aging workforce, skills gap, et cetera. And then again, wraparound services for entry-level workers, apprenticeships, which I know, again, Vermont Roundtable is working on, and a lot of folks are working on in the manufacturing space. And then flexibility has become kind of the leading request among the potential employees. And I'm sure some of you have probably experienced that in trying to hire folks as well. So the common needs, what we kind of distilled it down to was employability skills. I think a lot of folks in manufacturing, again, it's not just the actual skills they need to show up to work every day. I know that's something we hear again and again and again, is that like they'll hire someone and they don't even show up, and then, you know, you waste all this time. 6 months ago they quit, whatever. From their data, there was a preference towards a high school technical education, but it wasn't required for everyone. And then a preference towards certified production technician training on the production side. So then again, kind of going through the critical occupations. I don't need to go through each of these individually, but it just talks about the specific certifications for each of those. That is, that again, Vermont Talent Pipeline Management has kind of put together to show, you know, if we needed to scale up, if we're scaling up for X, Y, and Z position, this is what it would look like. So stopping there just as an aside, we kind of, that's really establishing like what our employer need is. So I'll just like pause there for a second to take any feedback or questions people have. And then we're going to go into kind of like, what are the pools of people that we would be pulling from in order to, you know, feed into a job.
So do you mind, could you go back up one slide? And then just looking at like the CNC machinist, the NIMS machining level 1, NIMS machining level 2, is that, so this, and then Marianne, this is data that you collected through the talent pipeline. And then, so these are like specific trainings that the employers kind of like, this is a requirement.
Well,
this is really what they want.
We asked them to define whether it's required, preferred, or not needed.
Okay.
And so the things that are highlighted here, I don't have the data right in front of me, but I think that they're either required or preferred. Probably.
Yeah. So we can send over afterwards. Marianne's full report, because that's really where the meat of this comes from. But that's it. When I looked at it, most of these, I don't believe it was required. It was just
right. But this is a
preferences. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
And then the other thing that I think is important to know is that this is 45 employers. So, you know, it's a cross section from around the state of different types of employers. Some of them are durable and some of them are non-durable companies. So CNC machinist probably only represents the number of employers in that is probably more like 25, which is actually pretty high when you think about 45 total.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much.
Other thoughts from folks? Barry, if you're talking to us, you're muted. But if you're talking to someone else, feel free to go ahead.
Yay, thanks for letting me know. I always laugh when other people do that. A couple slides earlier, it had mentioned something about high wage jobs. I was curious, is every role on this list earn at least a livable wage?
So livable wage is an interesting category. It's dependent on the household income. So if you're talking about an individual, the entrance point for this is probably about $20 an hour.
Gotcha. So in the range, do you mind going, Tori, to the page that has all the jobs? I think a couple more down.
Order backwards.
That one works. Because so I'm making a guess that some are on the higher end of that, and some are on the lower end. So one of the things that's a bit challenging is, are we, you know, as we go and we think about success metrics and moving people towards, you know, upskilling, is that my hope is wherever the threshold is, when we're helping people achieve that whatever job they're going into, for that area, we could call it livable wage or something that helps them be, you know, have a sustainable living. And my hope is, as we think about the difference between manufacturing and advanced manufacturing, that we're able to help companies transition to technologies that can be more efficient and effective, and help then bring in the people and upskill people so that wage can be at a place where, you know, it's livable for the family or sustainable for the area.
Yeah, quite well taken, for sure. Any other thoughts from folks about just the beginning initial need? I mean, I think a lot of you who work in this space, it's pretty similar to your experiences. All right. So feeder pools kind of into this workforce. Obviously, there are people that are not coming from these specific areas that go into these jobs. But I think I want to talk about some of the places where we currently are pulling from. And I don't mention in here, but I think in each of these, and you know, we're working with Susanna Davis's office, hopefully soon in here about diversity within the field and et cetera. So I just want to make a point to say that we did not include any information on that, but I think one solution we may look at is how do we increase the number of women in these things, or how do we increase the number just to increase the size of the pool. So I just want to put that out there to start, but we'll kind of go through what our like universes are for K through 12 CTE, post-secondary, and training programs. So, I mean, obviously our school population is decreasing or has declined over a period of time. Right now, since 2017, though, we've increased, which is good. There's not really anything like I'm asking for you to look through these numbers. It's just kind of so that we all kind of have a conceptual understanding of who's going through the system. And then again, similarly with our, graduation cohort rate. So you take those, kind of the top class, and that's the percentage that's graduating. So those would be ideally people that would be going into our workforce or into post-secondary training, or, some other form of training outside of the school system after graduation. So then we look at CTE from 9th and 10th grade compared to the general education. It has increased a little bit from year to year since 2018, 2019. We don't have any data past this because this is from the last Perkins report, but it is, it is increasing slightly, I guess, but not so much so that it's like this massive increase. It seems like it's stayed pretty steady. So that's just something to keep in mind again as we're looking at the back end of how, getting more kids into the CTE or tech ed training. And then similarly with 11th and 12th grade, we're seeing an increase, but again, pretty stable. Like it's around 35, 36, 37. It's actually a lot less than in the, 2006, 2007 time period. So again, that's a big feeder pool. As we mentioned earlier, like employers prefer, it's not required, but prefer someone with some, technical education experience. And then just, as an overview, and I think some of this information, for example, like the numbers, and then this slide where we have like the servicing areas, like this is where these are our tech centers across the state. So when we, when we're thinking about strategies and we're talking about a regional approach, these will be our partners in those areas and in the high school setting. And then again, training infrastructure. So kind of on the other side, this is obviously both post-secondary and also just for folks going into the training. So, some of the folks on the left is our the training providers in Vermont, the kind of main training providers. This is not an exhaustive list, so there's definitely more, but those are kind of the top ones that are recognized by the State Workforce Board as our last credential in training time period. And then again, some of the different areas that we obviously train in. And, I don't know the numbers on each of those training programs. So I think that's something, again, we should probably look into and get more information on, is like what number of people are in these programs. But again, that's like another feeder space into the different manufacturing careers. And then this is information from the UVM Center for Engagement, and I apologize that it's a little bit grainy, but what they did was break down by manufacturing openings and folks who completed manufacturing degrees, and kind of looking at the numbers. And I think the most stark thing here is that there's a huge mismatch between the number of people with the engineering degrees and then the job openings that are related to engineering. So this is at the top end. Obviously, this isn't from the bottom end of the manufacturing, like the entry point, but I do think it's important to note, like they do have a kind of a capacity issue on the engineering training front in terms of placing folks in the jobs. And I don't believe this would translate necessarily into these people taking jobs in Vermont. So, we could have gotten one of the 236 people in Chittenden County. So, we just don't know what that number is, but I think that's just important to note.
Excuse me, are those degrees from Norwich and VTC and others as well?
I don't know. I can ask them.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's actually a good question, Marianne. And then this kind of shows just the completions by institution and their trend. So, UVM's down a little bit, but, BTC, it just kind of shows what their market share is of the engineering degrees. This is again from Vermont Talent Pipeline. I just thought it would be good to kind of include this because I think Marion does a good job at just showing how a career could develop and, what the kind of touch points are in terms of getting someone, leveling someone up in a career or finding career growth or, how, where does a team leader normally come from? Well, 31% can be fed from machine operators or, that type of thing. So I thought this was kind of a good slide in terms of just visualizing the system. And Marion, I didn't know if you had anything else to say about this.
No, not really.
Right.
It's hard to see like that in the career pathway here that at the top, you can't see, but it has salary information. It's like average salary from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for Vermont. So you can get a picture of like if you're starting in one of the entry-level roles with some additional education, but not necessarily a degree, you can advance, I can't even see it myself. I'm going to say $10 an hour or something to that effect with just some training program which occurs. So.
Right. So obviously that was a quick overview. We can go through anything in the past, but essentially what we want to, each of you should have the PowerPoint, so I encourage you probably to pull it up on your screen so you can see it better and look through things. But we really want to brainstorm kind of like what does the data appear to tell us, and then kind of gear some of this towards what our priorities are. Obviously, there's more information to be gleaned, but I do think this kind of gives like a very basic framework of what the system is currently looking like right now. And then again, how can we measure success? Kind of like what Barry touched on earlier. We just want to open it up. So I guess what we'll start with is kind of what does the data appear to tell us, or at least appear to you? What are you, what did you see at the kind of quick first overview?
I may be jumping ahead on this because I've been looking at this data for a year.
Go ahead.
So some of the things that I think about here are what are some of the places that we have untapped, that we could feed new employees from. So when I worked with the Agency of Commerce on the Good Jobs Challenge, which was a grant request, we looked at like systems that exist in our state and how we might be able to pull from economic opportunity, Agency of Human Services, like a variety of different resources that already exist in our communities that lack the connection to skilled training, and pretty basic skill training. But what if we were to recruit and do some wraparound services for the people who have barriers to going to work? That's just one of our, thoughts about who else, because I think that we're not going to manufacture more people. So we have to think about the people who are already here and how to get them into the jobs. So.
Yeah.
So can I ask a couple questions about the data? Because when I was looking through it, when I'm looking at the pre-K through 12 numbers. So basically I'm looking at that. If that is the case, and I just divide that number by 13, that's the number of people graduating, give or take. And then I go and apply the percentage who are dropping out. So there's a pool of people who are out of this 74,000 this year. If I look at the graduation rate, there's 12% of, let's say, 6,000 people that are going where? Are they getting GEDs? Are they just doing basic entry-level positions somewhere? Is there a way to capture, to me, what sounds like a fairly large percentage? I guess I didn't realize that weren't making it through high school these days. is there any way to understand where they are as a cohort?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that we could definitely dig into with Agency of Education, because that kind of connects to what Marianne was saying, like that's an untapped group of people. I mean, we just don't know where they're headed. If they're not graduating, where are they going? And so I think, this could be a good opportunity for some of them if we get them into training or wraparound services, like she mentioned, to kind of help move them forward.
Right.
I guess this the data as well is pretty interesting. The geographical locations of all the institutions are pretty interesting to me, and I wonder if just by nature of where we are, they're actually quite far away from each other and probably quite far away from people who may not have the income to be able to travel each day and every day, etc. Is there any information or detail within this data or background metadata to how much of these courses are remote versus in person, and for what periods?
I don't know if it exists, but it's something we could look for. It's a good question to ask.
Because
I know individual institutions, like Barry could probably talk about VTC, like individual institutions would obviously know that about their courses. So it may just require some outreach from Abby and myself to figure out with the different entities what their breakdown is.
Because that actually, I've got no data to back this up, but my hunch is actually that maybe if there's a lot of in-person courses, that could be a potential reason why people may not actually follow through. They might be more likely if some of them are online, but I don't know that for a fact.
Are you talking about the engineering programs? Yeah, because I was going to say there's a lot of programs that sort of lead up to engineering that aren't really listed on this, but they were on the, I can't tell you what screen it was, but the training infrastructure page.
Yeah.
That like CCV has, I'm going to say 11, 14 locations around the state, which are pretty close to the technical center locations. And a lot of their entry-level credentials are offered in all formats. So depending on, you can take them remotely, there may be some hands-on component to it. You could take it in a hybrid format. You can do it at your client site, or you can do it at the school site. I think VTC actually is somewhat in collaboration with them. They have some materials that they can take on the road to people, so that they can bring it to another place. Barry, can you talk about that at all, or do you not know?
Yeah, actually bridging those two topics, I think they're fantastic topics. And just an observation in this, those roles that are there are very experiential based learning. And we talk a lot about at different schools and what are you offering as a program, whether that's CTE or whatever. What's the ratio of how much time somebody is spending experientially learning, creating, doing, and how much time is the pure academia? There needs to be a balance of both. But VTC in some schools emphasize the we'll call it the hands-on making, doing, augmented with a book piece. And on the other side, a lot of schools, UVM, St. Mike's, the others on there, emphasize the academia with the hands-on experiential learning. So it's that both are needed, both are necessary, but I do think it's probably important to recognize the type of learner and what somebody wants to learn has a best match and for what they're trying to come out of. So it sort of helps to prioritize where are programs and what would we build to help somebody have the best chance of success. My other observation is folks that like to go do this kind of stuff do like the more experiential learning. So if I zoomed out and said, where are the places that are primarily focusing on the experiential augmented with academia, it is the VTCs and the career technical education centers. So in this space of what you're trying to build, I would say we should prioritize thinking the channels of those type of learning spaces more so than the Norwiches. I'm not knocking any of those, but the jobs we captured in there are much more experiential. The other thing that's kind of an observation in there for me is roughly just looking at the number, 5,500 students graduate a year. So I just divided in half the number of how many 11th and 12th graders. So somewhere 5,000, 6,000. If that data that says the number of engineers comes out is 300, that's a very 350. That's a very, very small percentage of people that followed a STEM passion. And somewhere along the line, people are dropping out. Of course, there's other sciences and chemistries, but I know I have asked 100 different times if I go to young folks and I say, who thinks manufacturing would be cool? You'll get crickets, and you'll actually have some people have a visceral reaction and run away. If I say, who likes to play Minecraft? And I will get nearly everybody raising their hand. And you're like, okay, do you know what we do? We play Minecraft. First, we design it. We do some digital stuff. We scan it. We draw it. And then we go figure out how do we make it. And this is the other observation / priority is the way that we market and talk about what the jobs are and the way we demonstrate it today does not incite passion. Like, we've got to figure out how early do we expose people of all ages to what this whole world is, as we transition, and what day-to-day would look like, and how it aligns with their passion. So it just seems to me, looking at the data, that somewhere along this path, we're, even from high school on, we're dropping out a lot of people who might have a passion for STEM and manufacturing or this space. They're going somewhere. And I would think figuring out what was the barrier that's getting created and why are you going somewhere else when I know the ratio of people who are passionate about STEM is not 350 divided by 5,500. So, 2 observations.
Can I add, I'm going to add one more, I'll say observation, and maybe it's because I'm old school, or maybe it's because my company has had to develop our own training programs to get basically high school graduates to come in and be productive. But going back to the comments on remote versus in person, we talked also that one of the challenges is employability and basic school. If we don't do it in person, we're losing a huge opportunity to train them just to come to work, just to come to class, to come, and then go to work. So I understand that there's some hybrid that's probably going to work best, but if we don't ask them to start coming in, they aren't learning those skill sets early enough. So I just want to throw that out there. That's something that we're kind of passionate about, to say this is the experience they have to start having at a very young age to understand just the routine or just the discipline, to show up.
Yeah. And I think that does kind of go along with some of the work that the generator is doing. And I know I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse here, so Meg, I apologize if it's not something you've already but they've toyed with the idea of, we're going around the state working with tech centers, kind of, channeling their program in other places, not just in the Burlington area in their one space. But I think that type of exposure really early to using the materials, getting comfortable with 3D printing, getting comfortable with some of these things, I think that's a really good way to get some kids some experiential learning without it being necessarily like they're already showing up for a job. Like, maybe it's before they're going into a tech center. I just think that's something, that type of exposure early might help them get excited, because Barry, kind of what you were talking about, like, I know when Abby and I went to the generator, neither she or I are really STEM people. That's just not what we did, and that's not what our career path ended up being. But we both left being like, this is so cool. These are all the things you can create. And there's someone here making jewelry, and there's someone here sewing, and there's someone here doing all these things. So I do think like that type of exploration is really important if we're going to like rebrand what manufacturing is for kids.
Yep, totally agree. And I know we've talked about that before. Really, there's a path for learners that first you have to become aware, and then you figure out, do I have a passion for it? And then you're willing to learn. You can't start from the learn. You can't just, if you hand a book to somebody and say you have to learn it, you get our regular education system that doesn't necessarily align a passion or desire for somebody. And so I think just, on the side, especially in alignment with Megan Generator and other spaces, is figuring out those things that builds an awareness so that somebody can decide, is this something that's fun and I have a passion about? I don't care if we call it STEM or whatever. Many people like to make stuff and they like to think things up and they like to be creative. And if that's something you enjoy, I can promise there's a space for you in this. But the data would show that a very, very small percentage of the people pursue, a career in doing that, when I think indications would be a lot more people are interested in that.
I'm gonna
I
skip
just-
just a tour. So I just want to quickly, so with regard, sorry, Meg, just as a
Okay.
quick, like more current example, we had White River Valley High School students. They just came in for a tour, not even for our design lab programming. And it was hard to get them back on the bus. I mean, they were having so much fun. To the kids, they have, they took my cards, I can follow up, I'm available this summer, how can I make this work? But never being in the space before, like their eyes were popping out of their head and they were just mesmerized by it. And so to that awareness component, we didn't even have that design lab programming set up for this particular group for this day to fit their schedule. But just, I mean, seeing it and being in the physical space was so rewarding for them, in addition to the other design labs. Sorry, Meg.
No, it's okay. I was just going to confirm that what Tori is saying is that I think we see ourselves in one of those graphs as, there's no like maker space, there's tech centers, but I think we're trying to be a feeder to catch between the high school and the college in a way where we can provide some of that training, but maybe they, like, once they're here at Generator or the Mint or any other maker space in the state, they might start thinking like about Vermont Tech's programs and get a little more engaged, or they might jump into a job and then think about the Vermont Tech later, or VCV, or, like, we're hoping that we can A, fill some gaps, and B, catch some of the people that might even get a GED and ends up falling into, like, coming through for a tour, whether it's at Art Hop or any other time. So that is one of the roles that, I know our numbers are going to be quite low in comparison to the numbers that you're gathering, but for the next couple of years, I think that's one of the goals, is to start increasing slowly for what we can support.
Yeah.
And we will have certifications coming out of Generator, and we will be doing teacher training as well, and have certifications for teachers to start bringing more of this to their schools. And when we have this renovation this fall, we'll have 2 new classrooms where schools can come. We can have 2 schools at a time come to Generator for field trips.
Wow. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's huge, Meg. I mean, even aside from the value of the certifications, I think the Generator is is a great place for people to see the kind of the art of the possible. And I do think it could be a huge asset. And again, like you said, feeding into the passion side of what, both the awareness and the passion side of what Barry was talking about.
Yeah, we also might be a feeder for students in their sophomore year deciding they want to go to a tech school, a tech center,
Yeah.
So there's options there.
Yeah.
We've noticed, though, practically speaking, there is a difference between the perception in our field. We're a high volume manufacturer. We also do design as well, and there's a difference between the perception of the glorious side of the design for production and the reality of it. Sometimes things are extraordinarily mundane and boring and repetitive. Occasionally, you have a really, really, really fun, creative experience. And when I say occasionally, it's there obviously, but production is production ultimately. And so it's managing those expectations early on, and we've actually been through a couple of very, very talented young designers who wanted to sit on a beanbag and design listening to loud music, which isn't conducive to really, a collaborative, high volume production sort of site. So that's a kind of interesting thing that we've encountered, and I wonder how we sort of bring younger folks into our facilities earlier to expose them to what the reality of our kind of manufacturing is. I wonder if any other facilities have had the same sort of experiences that we've had.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a valid point, right? Like, I think manufacturing needs a rebrand in general. I think it's just seen as, I think people think of like World War II, honestly, when they think of manufacturing. It's just very different. Obviously, it's not going to be, like you said, there's going to be repetitive processes and different things that are part of it, depending on the company as well. But I think showing at the very least, you know, giving clear expectations that, again, you're not working at necessarily at Google, but there's room for career growth in all of these areas, and there's a way that you can do it. There's a way that you can upscale. There's a way that you can get to this next level or get to the place that you want to be. I mean, I know, like, even all of our jobs, I'm sure you started off doing the most repetitive thing that you hated doing. I did here in the governor's office, that's for sure. So I think, you know, if there's a way that we can be, kids can come in with their eyes wide open, but also their eyes wide open about the possibilities, that it's not just like a dead end. This is what you do for the next 25 years of your life, is just, you know, cut this one same piece of wood in the same position every single day of your life. I think that could be like valuable in them understanding, you know, this is what a career could look like for them.
I think this point is a really good representation of what we're going to see. I'm just curious, at your guys' place, how much of the things you're doing are automated and people are spending time, maybe say writing the CAM software or doing tool paths, versus somebody that's a true production operator that's manual, doing it over and over and over?
Are you asking generator?
No, Daniel.
Oh.
So yeah, those are two different positions. So we have the operators who do the operating, and then we have the programmers and the designers who do all of that side, you know, with SolidWorks and whatever languages they're using. And you know, ultimately, for people's sanity, we like to change things up and move people around as much as we can. For production efficiencies, that doesn't happen quite as often as you sometimes would like. But we really do every effort to move people throughout the plant and expose people, cross-train people, so that not only is there scope for sort of learning new things and progressing. The other point that I wanted to make, and I think somebody, forgive me, I'm not sure who said it, the scope for progression within an organization is extraordinarily important. And I'm going to blow our own horn here. We always try to promote from within prior to looking outside of the organization. If somebody's got an aptitude for something, though they may not have a direct skill, we will do everything we can to train them for a new position rather than find somebody from somewhere else to bring them in. And communicating that to our new employees is extraordinarily important, that there is scope for internal progression if you work hard, if you turn up on time, if you show an aptitude and a willingness to learn. So
yeah, so a follow-on question, and this is really, I think, indicative of the whole ecosystem. When I talk to young learners about what kind of stuff do you want to do, you know, very few in that path would say, I want to do what you would describe in the production operator piece. And I'll share, I worked at Intel a long time ago for years, and a lot of people's jobs were pick this lot up, put the lot down there, and count the lots and push it around. The willingness and desire for people to do that today is really low. There might be a reality check in there to say that of all of those types of roles, we need X to fulfill that. It might not just be realistic. And I'm wondering if there's an understanding or an appetite to say, what can we do through automation that minimizes, reduces, or eliminates those type of jobs, but increases the ones that are the ones that are doing more of the programming or CNC or tool paths or SolidWorks. Two reasons why. If we have a known gap in production and we don't have a lot of people that want to go do that when they find out what it is in today, yet youth coming in to do that, there's going to always be that gap. So can we accelerate implementing advanced technologies in automation and CNC so that the number of jobs that are truly doing those production shrinks rapidly, but we're growing rapidly the ones that pay 50% more and entice people to do that. I just see that over and over and over again from places that have a large population of folks that they need production people and operators. And I just don't, when I talk to tons of students, they're not saying that's what I want to go do.
Yeah, I can speak to that just real quick. Obviously, we're manufacturing and we need people who are running equipment that it's production, manufacturing. But I also think you hit it on the head when you said we need to be realistic. The young person walking in the door who's a great video game player is not going to go get a job designing product or engineering without an education or some training. And I think there is a disconnect in terms of the expectation when they're coming in looking for a job based on what they like to do and what they're qualified to do. There is a large disconnect there for us. And again, we try and get them in the front door, understanding that, you know, we'll work with you, we'll provide the training. But we also now can't rely on a high school education or a GED that says, you know, with that, there's a certain amount of education. You can read, write, and do basic math. We don't even have that anymore to rely on. So for us to vet that entry-level person, we're doing more hand-holding than we ever have in the past, because we can't rely on certificates or high school diplomas meaning something anymore. So it is very challenging to bring them in, because we have every intention of bringing them in and moving them up. And as I said, we want to promote within. It's interesting that team leaders, you know, is on one of the top lists, because most of us, I believe, do promote from within because of their experience and understanding of the culture and been given on hands-on. And there's a ton of leadership classes and opportunities to supplement what we're training them to do. But it's finding the individuals that realistically understand what type of skill sets or education they need. And for me, that's the challenge.
Can I just clarify one thing that you said? So you're saying that you can't rely on those certifications or the high school diploma because the education at those spaces are not up to par? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'm hearing from HR continuously that, you know, whether it's the GED or the high school, they can't read a ruler. I mean, we work in math and measurement all the time. Understanding how to do basic math is something that we teach employees now, and there's more of that than we've had in the past. So yeah, it's not consistent in Franklin County from high school to high school. And again, I don't know what the requirements are. You know, it's something that, as we're talking about the feeder pools, it's kind of interesting to me, because there is somewhat of a void there in terms of just knowing they can read, write, and do basic math. And when I say do basic math, understand fractions, decimals, and work with that. What I would have said before is 8th grade math. Now you can't know for sure coming in with a high school education that they have that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think hopefully with, and I don't remember if this ended up getting passed, and I apologize, but, you know, changing some of the funding formulas so that schools are not disincentivized to send kids into CTE, I think can help some of that, because I do think there is like not for every kid, some kids are meant to do it, but I do feel like a lot of times they will throw in low performing kids into the training, the trades, just because they don't know what to do with them. And I think part of the work that we can do here is expanding what the trades can look like, expanding that group of kids. So it's not just the typical, you know, kid that's in a CTE program. It might be someone who, you know, might think that they want to go to college, or they think they want to do this thing, but then they go to VTC and they see you can design a snowboard, you know, through using the technology. They might be more interested in that. So I think, you know, part of that is expanding that group of kids. But I also think, and that's one of the conversations we're having in the Career Pathways Committee, Monica, is how do we prepare kids through work-based learning or tech classes so that they're ready for the workforce on the employability skill side? Because that is, I mean, you saw that, I mean, that is in the data. We didn't do the whole thing, but there's a whole section that Marianne kind of, you know, in terms of importance, and it was very important for them to be able to, you know, have, you know, good attitude, have communication skills, have these types of things. And that was kind of clear for every employer, for every job. And that's very consistent with what we're hearing now is the kids that you're getting, even not just manufacturing, like there's a lot of on the job training that they didn't necessarily, like, not even skill related, just like basic, you know, employability skills training that they didn't have to do in the past. So I do find that interesting, and I think it's going to get actually a little bit worse for a while because we have a lot less kids working in high school right now, just based on the data. I think then it will get better, but I just wanted to that's a point well taken for sure. So
Yeah, and you
transition.
also,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you hit on the other thing about the CTEs, and it's not favorable for the schools to promote students going there because the money follows them and the school has money. And that's very clear to me as a parent of a 12-year-old. When in middle school, they start exposing them. But the emails that go out don't have links, it doesn't have any language like the CTE is like as a possibility, or even an exciting possibility at the very least. And there's nothing that really promotes it, actually. And I think, I don't know, when we were in the governor's office a long while ago, we were talking about some of this, there was supposedly some money that was going to be put aside for promotion marketing of the skills and the training and the CTEs, and trying to remove that stigma. And it's very clear, right? Like just in all of the emails that I get, that it's not desirable.
Yeah, Marianne.
Yeah, I always like to start with like sort of a big picture, which in my opinion, manufacturing has been overlooked in the policy segment for kind of a while. If you look at the current workforce bill that's about to be signed by the governor, there's nothing in there about manufacturing. There's something about trades, there's something about nursing, but manufacturing is really not really listed. If you looked at the jobs that were part of like, move to Vermont, we're going to pay you or whatever, they gave a list of jobs. Manufacturing wasn't in there. I was like, who's developing this? Where's the policy making occurring? Because I see it like a disconnect there. This is the one industry that actually is the most relevant to bringing new money into our state. Like it's like, you know, we really should be thinking a lot more broadly about how manufacturing is represented in our policy making. Like, should it be an association that does that, but I think that this group here is a really good start for that. And I think that Tori's good at carrying the water for us in order to make some of that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great transition also into my next point is, you know, going off of that, I think I agree, Marianne. I think manufacturing needs more attention. I think a lot of people don't think Vermont manufacturing. I think they think Vermont farming. And when you actually look at the data, while we do have a big agriculture, you know, section, manufacturing is a huge piece of our economy. And it's a growing one, especially with all the aerospace stuff that's happening in Vermont, which is very cool. So I think, you know, we definitely, this is the time is right to kind of start bringing this forward. So with that, I'm curious, you know, some initial thoughts about what you all think maybe our top priorities should be if we're, you know, what we're looking to do. Is it awareness and engagement? Is it increasing program? You know, what are those types of things you think should be our top priorities? Go ahead, Daniel.
Can I just want to, sorry, I have to sign off in just a couple of minutes, so I apologize if I missed the end of this. I just wanted to, completely different subject in a way. I just wanted to let everybody know to have a look at the new S53 bill that's just passed, because there is some tax benefits to manufacturing companies, I believe, written in that, although I haven't read all the details of it yet. So just it might be interesting to most of us to have a look at that bill.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, I'll take any thoughts or feedback about where people think our time or energy would be best spent. It doesn't need to be a specific program yet. It could just be, you know, like a general thing, like a decreasing barriers or whatever.
I'll add something to the thought process here. I really like the concept of apprenticeship as a model in general, because you can start people who don't have significant amount of skill and get them involved in basically a craft that they're learning. And as they advance in their skills, they get planned wage increases. So like some of our manufacturers in the state are hiring people and they're putting them through training programs so that they can advance within their organization. So I'll use a couple examples. Darn Tough is one of them. When you get hired by them, they want everyone to go through the Certified Production Technician program, whether it's for credit or just for knowledge base. And with it, there's planned wage increases. But from there, you could go on to the next role and do that with an apprenticeship. People are getting paid, they're getting release time, and they're starting with very low skill and developing them over time. So those are some thoughts that I have about how to interest new people in manufacturing.
Yeah, and Marion, I know we talked about this at one point, just connecting with VDOL, but did you ever, is there more that's being done with the kind of development of the apprenticeship program for manufacturing, or I just didn't remember where that was left off?
Well, CCV has a manufacturing apprenticeship for certified production technician, and they run it in all areas of the state. We have a group up in Northeast Kingdom who are doing it together. And then I'm working with River Valley Career Center down in Springfield to talk to them about a CNC apprenticeship that begins with certified production technician and then adds on the NIMS 1 and 2 for machinists. Okay. So, but that's really sort of, I'm hoping that we get more support on that one.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Can I just quickly jump on that? Because I had apprenticeships down because Vermont Precision Tools has developed that. I have a full-time instructor on staff in order to supplement that. But one of the things I wanted to do is look at how do we get support from the education community to supplement that? Because again, we do have to start with basic math, and we go from in 8 weeks from basic math to programming CNC. So it's an accelerated, fully paid apprenticeship, but we really could use the support on the education piece, those basic skills.
Okay, that's helpful.
And I'm sure smaller employers would as well benefit from that.
Yeah. Other thoughts for things that should be our priorities, Barry?
Yeah, I'm one that always tries to, at least the way my brain works, to start with the end in mind and understand what do we really want to accomplish. And for me, I get challenged to say what's a priority, because I'm trying to figure out what exactly would we want to accomplish and what does success look like. So maybe if we're meeting again in the future, a conversation could be around, what are those things that we would say this was ultimately successful? Like, have we shrunk the number of job openings, or have we kept more Vermont students in the state of Vermont? Or I'm sure it could be a very big list, but if we could pare it down to, in this space, in this committee, what exactly would we want to accomplish? And, what's that metric? I personally would be much better able to say, okay, here are the 3 or 4 ideas that we could go launch and do. Otherwise, I feel like we could offer 10 collection of things to do and not really know if we're hitting the mark. But I'll just say that's just me that way.
No, I think that's a good idea. And I think that's a good point for our next meeting. Is at our next meeting, I think one of the things Abby and I can do is any questions that were asked, get that information that folks were asking for. If it's available, if it's not, we'll let you know, obviously. But I know some folks had clarifying questions about the, some of the school data and all of that. And we can, again, recirculate the PowerPoint, but recirculate that with more information. And at our next meeting, we discuss kind of like, again, what would success look like? Is it increasing the number of kids in CTs? Is it like, what would that, maybe that number, or what are we looking for? And then from there, as a group, we can establish these are our top priorities and the activities that we would do in order to get that, if that is all right with everyone.
I think it would be really helpful. And I also think, like, who are the customers? In a way, a lot of the folks here are the ultimate customers. If the goal is to figure out how do we help the workforce so that, what comes out of, what is the impact? What is the benefit? Is it so that we grow the economy, or we have more jobs? Or I'd love to have that conversation. One, from the perspective of how does that truly help the end users, the businesses who need these folks, and from the governor's perspective, why does this matter? And Department of Labor, but ultimately the governor. So super helpful if we came in with that, like, what is this ecosystem we're trying to solve? that can bring the group as a collective. Because as a training facility in advanced manufacturing, without understanding what we're trying to do, we'll just chunk people through. But
Right.
give us the what are we trying to accomplish, we can certainly steer to try to have the greatest impact that we can.
Okay. I think that's great. Well, with any other questions, if you all look through the data again, if any other questions come up, please let us know. We'll put in some more data requests from folks to get some of that information fleshed out. Obviously, if you have a question about Vermont Talent Pipeline Management, Marianne is your girl. We are just here to show the great work that they did. We didn't, we don't have any way to know about any of that. So, but Abby and I will get to work on answering some of those questions. And then, yeah, our plan for next month's meeting will be establishing, again, what does success look like? What could be our, we distill that down into, okay, these would be the most important things right now. Maybe these are later. And then what activities we can do to start taking action this summer on, developing policy, fixing systems, whatever that needs to be. Great. Well, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. Hopefully it's sunny where you are and you get outside.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.